Well, my name is Gisela Giordano, and on behalf of Wines of Argentina, I would like to welcome you all. I don't know if you can see me, but at least hear me. And thank you for joining from all around the world. This is the first of a series of talks that Paz Levinson will be doing with some of the top winemakers of Argentina. We will be doing these sessions during 3 more Wednesdays, so we hope to see you there too. We will be communicating all of this by email. We will be recording this session, and also we'll be sending the link for you to watch it again or share, and the harvest report. Having said this, thank you to all of you and to Paz and the winemakers.
Thank you very much, Gisela, and hello everybody. Thank you for being here with us today in our talk about the harvest report of 2020. So I'm Paz Levinson. I'm living in France, and since this year we couldn't travel to any wine fairs. I couldn't travel to Argentina. I couldn't anything of everything what I was planned. We decided to do these talks, so we get all the information with the best producers of Argentina. As Gisela told, there has been made a fantastic vintage report made by Vinómanos, and you will be receiving this report with the presentation as well. So it's a fantastic work that Vinómanos has made, because they talk with everybody in Argentina. So we have an overview of everything what happened in this vintage, very special vintage. And I want to say hello to all the friends. I saw that there is many friends from Mexico, from Canada, from UK. There is Costa Rica, Peru, Brazil. So it's very nice to see you here. And we will do it in English so everybody can understand. And we're going to start. So, well, this 2020 vintage, I've been heard that is a very, very special vintage, and we can make all the questions to the winemakers and engineers about what happened. We have today 4 of the best people to talk about the vintage in Argentina. So I will introduce our special guests. Is Ignacio Lopez, Nacho Lopez. Nacho is winemaker. He works in Bodegas Etchart. So he will talk us about Salta and all the northern region. We are going to do as well a brief introduction of each region, so you can see it now in the map. You can see as well. So the north, Jujuy, Salta, Tucumán, and Catamarca, is Nacho that will share with us. Research that he has made also with the colleagues is not only about his winery, but he has talked with many people in the north to share us all the information. So thank you, Nacho, for being here. We have Pablo Cúneo. Pablo Cúneo is the chief winemaker of Luigi Bosca in Mendoza. So Pablo will speak us about Cúneo, especially about Mendoza and what happened in Mendoza in terms of the vintage. There is Marcelo Belmonte, is the director of vineyards of Grupo Peñaflor. And so he is expert in all the country for sure, because they work many hectares in Grupo Peñaflor. But Marcelo today will focus in the Costa, in the Atlantic region. But also we're going to ask things about San Juan and about the different regions. But thank you, Marcelo, for being here, and thank you, Pablo. And to speak about Patagonia, we have a guest as well, is Hans Vinding-Diers. Hans lives in Patagonia, in Rio Negro, in Manqué, so in the area of production, and he's the owner of Bodega Noemia, and he will be sharing what happened in this of 2019 and 2020 harvest. So, as you see in the map, we will cover near all the country. yes, but for sure we will concentrate in the main areas to give you the best picture of this special vintage that many people told me it is a vintage that they were very lucky, and we are going to find out why. So in the north, Nacho, hello, and I will ask you to share with us just the main features about the north. Hello.
Hi, Paz. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here sharing with this amazing group of people, such a talented wine people which I look after. So as Paz said, everyone calls me Nacho. You can call me Nacho. I work in Bodegas Etchart, which is part of Pernod Ricard company. So just a quick spotlight about the North. When we do these kind of presentations, we talk about taking home messages. Right now, most of us are in home, so you have to keep this in home. So the messages about the North is that we produce probably a little bit more than 2% of the whole production of Argentina. Is where the highest vineyards in the world are located. It takes territory on 4 different provinces in the north of Argentina, as you can see there in the map. There is, and I'm going to be making focus further in the presentation about how diverse the north can be, because although it represents just 2 or 3% of the whole production, there is a huge diversity. There is a huge diversity in soils. There is a huge diversity also in altitude. We have more than 1 mile of altitude between the lowest. I mean, there are no low vineyards here, and the highest. So it's a huge differences, and these huge differences causes extreme conditions, and the extreme conditions produces extreme wines also. So this is just a quick spotlight. We're going to be talking more about the North further.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nacho. So we're going to ask Pablo to tell us just a quick overview of Cúneo region and which areas we are going to talk about.
Well, thank you, Paz, and hi, everyone. For me, it's an honor to be here sharing with so talented people and colleagues presenting Cúneo. Cúneo, as you know, is comprehended by 3 provinces of Argentina: Mendoza, San Juan, and La Rioja. It represents 95% of the total production of Argentina. Being Mendoza the biggest one and concentrate almost 20% of the production. Nacho said in the north, Mendoza and Cúneo, all Cúneo region, Mendoza, San Juan, and La Rioja, also present a high diversity in terms of altitude, soils. The common factor is that it's a very dry and desertic area, like all the foothill of the Andes of our wine regions. It has surfaces planted between 450 meters of elevation up to 2,000 meters of elevation in the highest area, San Juan and Rioja. The latitude it comprehends is in the center west of our country, between 28 degrees of latitude up to 35. This is a big presentation of Cúneo. Then while the speaking, we will go more in detail with different conditions of this year and the different areas.
Thank you, Pablo. And then maybe, Pablo, we're going to try without the video. We could hear, but I think a little bit with some interference.
Okay.
But I will tell you as long as we talk. If we don't understand something, we are going to ask. Thank you, Pablo. And so continuing with Patagonia and the Atlantic region. So here is a quick overview, and then we have 2 photos, one of the Atlantic and one of the Patagonian region. So for the Atlantic region, I will ask Marcelo Belmonte to do a to share quick characteristics with us. It's one of the newest wine regions in Argentina, so it's super interesting to hear Marcelo.
Hello, Paz, and hello everyone, the rest of the colleagues of the different wineries, Ignacio, Pablo, and Hans, here. Yes, it's one of the latest, it's the latest red growing area developed in Argentina and the smallest one. So I think that a few years ago we realized that we have a very long coastal areas in Argentina, and of course they are very interesting areas to explore. And I think in the future it could be a challenge for us as a country for winemakers to develop new areas. But you have different regions there. You have in Chapadmalal, that is the area that is more of factors. Then you have the Médanos area in Buenos Aires as well, Sierra de la Ventana, and there is a very interesting area as well in Viedma, Rio Negro. These three areas, Médanos, Sierra de la Ventana, and Viedma, they are a little bit warmer than Chapadmalal area, so you can grow there red variety as well as white. You can grow more late white varieties there. Chapadmalal is a region 2, it's cooler, so you have to be very specific about the varieties that you choose there. So the only varieties that you can write are mainly whites and Pinot Noir. The whites in Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, Albarino, and Pinot Noir as a red. We try other long ripening varieties. We will write properly there because it's very a cool region, very windy region. Also, it's a dry farm area, so we don't irrigate different in comparison to the west of Argentina. And of course, that the ocean influence is very strong in the climate. And later on, we can speak more in. But if you see the landscape, it's a very interesting landscape. It's a kind of rolling hills. You can see that landscape, and the vineyards are planted at the top of the poorer soils and more air movement in the. So we can talk later on with more.
Perfect. Is Maria Paula? Can you show us the photo? So, voila. This. No, the previous. So, as Marcelo was speaking about the green, how this region is green and not irrigated. So here is just a quick a photo, so you can visualize that it's very, very different of what we are going to see in the other areas. So it's much green. So there are cows, and we have a lot of production of cereals and for sure the meat, very good meat. So the next photo, yes, is the Patagonia, and Hans, this is Valle Azul. How are you?
Hi, Paz. Hi, colleagues. Hi, everyone. How are you all? It's quite funny because I'm reading the sort of translation that they're writing, as we speak. It's quite funny because it has nothing to do with what we say. It's really bad. Hi, I'll speak for Patagonia. Mainly, we're about 1,000 kilometers south of Buenos Aires, 2,200 kilometers north of Ushuaia or Tierra del Fuego, and it's about 1,000 kilometers, between the Andes and Atlantic Ocean. So it's really a vast area. But that said, it's only I think 1.5% of the production of Argentina, represents 1.5%. And that is divided in 3 different areas. So you get the Rio Negro Valley, you get the Neuquén, Estepa, which is like kind of a Patagonian steppe, and then you get Chubut, which is probably, I think, the most southern growing area in the world. So basically it covers a bit of terrain, but there are not many of us, as you can imagine. And the climate's very dry. We have practically no humidity, so it's very naturally organic. We don't have any kind of disease. For example, at our wine, Noemia, we don't spray at all. We don't spray any sulfur, no copper, nothing, which is quite incredible. And then, of course, we have abundance of water because there's a lot of water in Patagonia, and it's very good water. It's mineral water. There we go.
Thank you very much, Hans.
Thank you.
Beautiful place. And so here we have a chart of the harvest report about the yields, the quantity, yes, in terms of, as you can see, there is different years to 10 years here, and you can see the variations in different vintages. So we're going to talk about 2020, but for sure we're going to refer of previous vintages. So also we can talk, or we can see if there is a vintage that is similar to 2020 in some aspects, or very different. 2020 we see that is less yields. I read about more or less 23% less than last year, but as you know, we are just finishing the reports and the harvest. This is a very, very first report, and then experts can confirm this, but we can see that here is a little bit less, in quantity speaking. But quality was very, very good. And we're going to talk about the weather. So weather 2018-20, what affects in this vintage. If Paula, we go to the next, we are going to talk what professionals need to do in the viticulture in the field to work in the conditions of this season, and how the wines are. So the winemaking, how you have to adapt then the fruit that was getting in the winery and make the best wine. And for sure we're going to refer about coronavirus, COVID-19, and how each of the wineries make front of this situation, difficult situation. A harvest is a complex situation, and even more with this global situation. So this is what we are the different subjects we are going to ask to our guests. And for sure in weather, Pablo, we're going to start, if we go to the next, so we're going to talk about rain, temperatures, frost and hail in the different regions. And so for the first, we have also some photos, so you can travel with the photographs. And you can get inspired when we can get to travel again. Because it's very beautiful, our regions, our areas. And here is Mendoza. So Pablo, can you talk us a little bit about how was the rain or the dryness, the drought in this year?
Well, thank you, Paz. Please let me know if I'm okay with the audio, or if I just take out the camera. Well, this, as you can see in this chart, the rainfall for this season has been half of the average, so it has been a dry year. We can qualify it as a dry year. If you compare with historic, which is around 250 millimeters, this year, in general, 115 millimeters. So it's almost half. But this water came in fewer events, but with more intensity. This is part of the change of weather we're having in the years, and also we had this is the rainfall in the season, in the growing season. We also had low amount of snow in the winter. So this year, one of the a group of 7-8 years with the lack of water in the Andes. So other concern we had this year has been the lack of water to irrigate our vineyards. The good thing is that with that high conditions, we had a very healthy ambience to grow, ripen our grain. It's as tall, is almost naturally organic, having this dryness in all the area. I just wanted to add some comment about the quantity, because as the Paz told, it was a very low, it was a short vintage in the area of Mendoza and San Juan. For San Juan was the smallest in the last 10 years, and for Mendoza was slightly bigger than 16 and 17, which were short vintages. Just in order to add this. This was in general speaking about the rain.
Yeah, perfect. So this is very important about the maybe lack of water that you are experiencing in Mendoza, and this makes a little bit more difficult to the logistics, the management of water, I imagine.
Yes, of course, there is a lot of work doing in trying to save water, adapting the irrigation system, changing from flow irrigation to drip irrigation. Even the institution that controls the water here in Mendoza, they are making some studies, and they believe that there's a lot of work to do in order of improving the efficiency even in the flow irrigation. So we in the future we have to be very careful and very responsible in working on that.
Perfect. So Gisela, is okay? I hear a little bit that cuts a little bit, but it's okay for you. Maybe it's my connection, or
yeah, I think maybe we try without the cameras.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. So next, Paula, maybe we go to the photo. So here to introduce a little bit of Nacho to speak us about the rains, what happened in the north.
All right. So first with the camera, so you understand who's talking.
Yes,
Paula,
your connection is very fine for me.
It's good?
Yes.
Sweet. Okay, so
you can be with
Paula,
the camera, I think.
Yeah. Can we go to the map, Paula? I want to focus. I want to say about something about the north. No, sorry, about the map that was right next to the other one, please. You just continue, and I'm gonna say when to.
Yes, the rain map. That is
the
a
rain map,
very
yes.
good map that you made with other producers. That's it?
Right there. Yes. We need a previous one. The previous one,
yeah.
Not the rainfall chart. That one, yeah, sweet. So when we talk about Cafayate, I want you to focus about diversity. So I'm talking here on behalf of many colleagues from Cafayate. So I talked to the guys from El Esteco, La Rosa, I want to name them, Cavas de Santa Maria, so of course my fellows here at Pernod Ricard, Piatelli, El Esteco already said, Tapuil and Colomé, just to have a quick overview here about what is happening in Cafayate. So in terms of yield, for example, in such a small, different place, we can talk about a range of probably 5 kilometers, that would be about 3.1, 3.2 miles. We had very huge differences about yields, for example. We had, for example, in terms of yield, compared with 2019, about 2% more of the global number. But if you go and you get into, and you make a double click into every variety. We had 16% more in Malbec. We had 3% more in Cab, probably 15% in Syrah, 6% more in Chardonnay, but we have 8% less in Torrontés. And that is focused in that Torrontés, as Torrontés is a very light, late ripening variety. We cultivate all the Torrontés in the lower parts. So in the lower parts, it's where the cold air, when we have a frost, stands there. So we have some frost damage. Now we can see with the final numbers. When we started harvesting, we didn't see a big impact on the frost, but then when we get to the end, now we see that we have some differences. And in that beautiful map that was made by Guillermo Corona it's a very good friend, and it's a extremely interesting guy to talk to. He helped me to do this. So you can see, for example, in the main spot there where it says Cafayate Central with 220 millimeters, between that point, that would be with the biggest amount of rainfall, and the lowest, that is Rio Seco, with 220, we have just 5 kilometers. So in 5 kilometers, we have a difference of rainfall that is probably the average rainfall for a year in Cafayate. Cafayate, we are at high altitude. The Calchaquí valleys and the north region, it's the main difference probably, or I would like to describe it as a high-altitude desert. So high-altitude desert, we have rain starting probably in November and ended in February, the last probably in March, and this was a very particular year also. Now we can go to the next one. So you see the big differences there, right there. So we have, if you start from the bottom and go right up to the top, we have from Santa Maria up to Cachi. Cachi, that vineyard, I want to thank again all the colleagues who gave me all this information from the weather stations. So you start Santa Maria, Tolombón, Rio Seco. This is, as Paz was telling you, that's why we have a picture back there behind the chart. We're traveling together from the south to the north of the Calchaquí Valley, and you see that all the rainfall is concentrated in the middle. Cachi is altura máxima from Colomé is that vineyard, then Colomé, Tacuil, the east and the west part of Animana. So the distribution of the rainfall follows quite a beautiful pattern if we talk about that belt shape, but it's quite unique. And right now, if we go to the other, to the next one, please, you will see here the historical for 12 years of rainfall. That's from our weather stations. So as you can see, the last strap there is showing very clearly that this is extremely wet and humid year for Cafayate. So you see that the total amount is the highest in the last 12 years. So that is quite clear. But once again, well, what you see right there in the photo, the big cactus is what we call the cardones. It's a native species and it's protected here. So that's why there is in the middle of the road and you cannot take it. So that's how we are working and that's how we're producing grapes and wines here. And Paula, to the next. This is in this beautiful chart we can see and we can take a lot of conclusions. Cafayate, the rainfall should start on December, January, and end on February. But you can see this is the summatory for 4 different weather stations located in Cafayate and Animana, and you can see how we had a very rainy spring with that amount on November, and we can see probably the same amount, a little bit more in March than in February. This should be in a regular year quite a arrow tip shaped graphic, and right now is with the extremes higher, you know. So how this translates into wine? This translates into lower sugar levels. which gives you lower alcoholic content, and we have a lot more of natural acids in the grapes because we had cloudy and shaded spring and end of the harvest. And that also gave us this beautiful ripening window that we had to pick the grapes that was a little bit longer. So we could have, if we wouldn't have the COVID-19 issue, this would have been an extremely relaxed year to pick the grapes because we had a very sweet and smooth ripening season. So I think that's it for the moment.
Perfect. Hans, in terms of rain, I know in Patagonia rains very, very little. It was as usual, nothing different. Hans?
Hello?
Yes,
Can
maybe
you hear
we
me?
go to the next photo. Yeah.
No,
Yes,
I'm
perfect.
here. I'm sorry, because I'm trying to charge my phone and everything is like kind of, yeah, I wish I could be so professional as my colleagues, but unfortunately I don't have any maps or anything. But basically this year it hasn't rained at all. I mean, nothing. I think probably 5 millimeters. What I'm talking about really is the growing time of the year, right? So that's basically from spring until now. But like I said before, in Patagonia we have this almost luxury to have a lot of water, as you know, Paz, because you are Patagonian. And
Yes,
and a
exactly.
lot of that water comes from where you were born, in Bariloche and in Nahuelhuapi, and that transforms itself into the Rio Limay, and that feeds the Rio Negro, where we are specifically. And so water is not such an issue for us.
So
Yeah.
you didn't have lack of water?
No, because we can irrigate at will.
Do you have to change?
Sorry? I didn't understand you.
So just a question. Just a question about if you had to change the frequency of irrigation this year, or was as normal?
No, well, the thing is that us in particular, we work organically and we use biodynamic practices. We've been doing that for quite a while. And what we find is that the more life you give to the soil, the more hydric retention it can contain. So basically we're getting less and less evaporation. Although it was a very, very windy year this year. I think you could call this 2020 a dry year. And I think that probably speaks also for Mendoza. So with this cultivating organically, etc., you tend to use much less water than if you overwork your soil, etc. So we flood irrigate, which is a horrible word. I really don't like that word, but it's the only word I can think of. So basically, we have.
But it's
canals.
very traditional.
Sorry? Yeah, it's
Very
very
traditional.
and it's very typical of this area. So I don't see. I always believed that the old people knew better. No, los ancianos saben más. And so we continue to irrigate, but we irrigate. For example, when I arrived here 20 years ago, a vineyard would be irrigated 20 times in a year. And we are irrigating it 2 to 3 times a year.
Perfect. Fantastic. Thank you, Hans.
Thank you.
So for Marcelo, can you talk us a little bit about the coast? We have a chart as well.
Okay, yes. First, I would like to complement some of the concept of regarding rain and what does mean on the viticulture side. Me as a viticulture, we usually how to adapt the practices according to the weather that is here. And for us, in all the west of Argentina, in Cúneo region, of course, that we had this year a very dry year, as Pablo perfectly explained with all the information in the graph. But that means that a year with low rains means that it's a year with less cloudy condition. That means that you have a higher radiation during all the season. So this year in the west side, except in Calchaquí valleys that were claimed that were more rainy, but that means higher radiation in the Cúneo region. So the water demand for the vines, for the evaporation is high. So the vines need more water because you have more radiation, it's a more clear sky, but you have then shortage of water. So the vines this year went through a more water stress or water restriction than other years. That was the main viticulture factor this year for me in the west side of Argentina. And of course, the low yield that you explained, Paz, means that you have, of course, a higher balance in vines, so higher number of square meter of leaves per kilogram of fruit. So you have a very, very well balanced canopy, and under more water stress. That was for me the main impact of the two factors that were discussed before. Regarding the west, the coastal area in Argentina, this is a graph, a comparison. This year was more rainy. It was a more rainy season. Can you hear me well, or kind of?
Can you turn off the camera just in case we can improve the sound?
Can you hear me better?
I think yes.
Okay. So in Chapamal, here was a more rainy season. You can see in the graph the difference between this year and the last year. This year we get more than around 600 millimeters of rain. Last year we get 400 millimeters of rain. So it was more rainy. We have to point out that in this area we don't irrigate. Everything is dry farm, so you don't choose when the water is going to come. So you are exposed to the weather, and as you know, all the oceanic climate are quite variable regarding the pattern of rain and temperature variation. So, but in this side, and complementing Hans' comment about the windy condition, this year was quite windy condition in the coastal area as well. So, however, you have more water because of the rain. This windy condition is the same effect as a water stress in the soil, because the vine try to close the stomata of the leaves, trying to protect from the loss of water. So you have more rain, but at the same time the windy condition make a quite strong stress in the vine, because the vine again closes the stomata, and it's the way that the vine reacts to this condition. So that's more the explanation about the rains. That the temperature will discuss. That's right, Paz, or we talk about temperature as well?
Yes, please. So now that you can do a overall of what happened in the region, but temperatures, for sure, and all the main subjects you want to talk about the harvest in that area. Yes, Marcelo? Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, regarding the temperature, was very, very similar to last year's temperature. The only month that was warmer was March, but the rest of the year the temperature were below the historical values. You can see the curve there, the maximum temperature. There's the red line, the medium temperature, that is the green line, and the blue line, that is the lowest. So most of the system temperature were a little bit below the historical values, but in March there was a peak of temperature, and we got some temperature above the historical record. But in average was the same temperature variation that the historical year. The season was very long, ripening season. We finished picking in the first week of May, so it was kind of inverse the season that in the Cúneo area. So it was a very long season. And of course, you can see during the springtime that the temperature are quite low. The coastal area is not like in continental or mountain climates that you have, the temperature during the spring are increased very rapidly. In the oceanic climate, the temperature increases very slowly, very slowly. So you have a very long spring, so that is more dangerous for frost. So how we manage the springtime in the coastal area are very different. We manage the vines in the mountain. Have to be very careful with shoot thinning at the beginning because, again, all the springtime is very long. The shoot growth is very slow as well during the springtime. So we don't try to shoot thin during springtime. And of course, March was a record in temperature in March, not just in the coastal area, but in the whole of Argentina. It was the warmer March in the last 50 years or something like that.
Marcelo, and the grape varieties for the coast, so everybody knows which are and what is the best for 2020.
Okay, we grow there Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc. We have a little bit of Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Albarino, going very well in that area. And the only red that we grow there is Pinot Noir. It's the only one that can completely ripe and get the profile of wine that we like. The Pinot Noir, for example, this year was finished the picking in the first week of May. So all the season is very slow. So we have a very long harvest season there. Was not a very concentrated harvest that like the rest of Argentina. So we took a lot of time to finish the harvest because of the good climate. But you cannot grow there late ripening season like other part of Buenos Aires and the Piedmont area. That is a very interesting area as well. I talked with the vineyard manager there, Carlos Correas, and he can grow there long season ripening varieties very well. It's a region 3 in the Piedmont area. In our area, it's a region 2 in winter classification. So we can accumulate around 1,500 growing degree days there. And it's very specific about the varieties that you can write in that. That is very nice to adapt the viticulture and the winemaking there according to the climate and to the soil.
Fantastic. So very different from the other areas in terms of vintage, of cooler vintage, and also more rainy, a vintage that was a long harvest season. So quite different about the other areas. Thank you, Marcelo. We will ask you maybe something about San Juan, but Pablo, here we have a picture of Mendoza. So if you want to talk a little bit about the temperatures and also how you deal with that and the overall feeling of this harvest.
Well, thank you, Paz. Regarding the temperatures, the growing season starts with September, which was very cold. Was one of the coolest September in the last years. So we had some problems with some frost damage in some areas. Overall, in the earlier areas like the east of Mendoza and some high elevation areas in the Buco Valley. But then rapidly after October up to March, we had all the temperatures above the historic, around 1 to 4 Celsius in the average temperature, also in the maximum temperatures, and that provokes a rapidly ripening. In the phenologies start in a little bit delay, 5 days, 1 week delay. Then flowering season was more or less in the same historical date, but the ripening from variation to the harvest, we have had a very quick ripening season. Normally this vintage we start picking the whites around 2 weeks before, 15 days before that we do normally. So end of January we start picking some white grapes coming from the Maipú area, even for sparkling wine, but at the next week we continue with the still wine because the bricks scale very quickly. So it was very challenging to decide the date of harvest. We very close to the vineyard, tasting the berries. By the beginning of March, we achieve 1,500 degree days. Is normally achieved mid to end of March, so that explains why it was an early season also for the reds. In average, we started picking the reds 3 weeks in advance. In this year, if you compare the temperatures, the hour of temperature between 20 Celsius up to 30 Celsius, where the photosynthesis is very active, this year, 2020, was the biggest amount in the last 3-4 years, where I have some numbers. So this is part of the explanation of this early season. Linked to the comment of Marcelo about the high amount of light. So temperature plus light is energy, and that makes the vines grows and ripen very quickly. Also, we had the March was the hottest March in the last 50 years, as Marcelo told, and this also provokes some shrinking, some dehydration of the berries that makes that the bricks goes up to high levels. That's also make us to pick earlier in order to have a good balance between acidity and sugar content. Regarding the white, I didn't mention that we have a great acidity with high content of malic acid. So we have good expression in fruits and good acidity, fresh acidity. And then in the red, we can measure the size of the berry, a smaller size of the berry, 5%, 6% than the average, and this was because of some hydric stress during the growing season. And finally, with this March that was 4 degrees above the average, there was some shrinking, so that provokes another 5% of concentration. We calculate that part of the low in the crop, 10%, 8 to 10% was due to the size of the berry. Apart from the frost, as I mentioned at the beginning, this year was affected around 17,000 hectares in Cúneo region, and this is above of the average. Normally the average is 12, 10. This year was 17,000 hectares. And regarding hail, we didn't have many issues with hail. Of course, we had some hectares damaged, but way low from the.
Maybe in Uco, Gualtallarí was experienced a little bit more hail. That is very rare.
Yes, this all Gualtallarí region unfortunately has been damaged by strong hail. Correct me, Marcelo.
Marcelo, yeah.
Was in February or something like that. February.
Yes, there were like 2 or 3 hailstorm, depending on the location in the valley in Guadalajara. But yes, I agree that this year was quite challenging regarding hailstorm in the Guadalajara area. However, it was a dry year that usually you get more damage of hail in humid year. So it was kind of different things that factor this year in Guadalajara.
Fantastic. If we go to the photo, then the next one,
Well,
then discharge. Yes, Pablo. Sorry,
no,
Pablo.
just to speak about the discharge, because it's a very
Yes.
has been made by Martin Kaiser. It's very good because it's very clear. It classificate and divide. You have in the vertical axis, you have the rainfall measuring millimeters, and then in the horizontal axis you have the temperature, and it classificates the different years, the different vintage, if it was cool, normal or hot, and in the average temperature in October to April, and in the classification in wet, dry, wet, or intermediate in the other sense. If you look at 2020, this last harvest is similar to 1999, or could be similar in terms of temperatures to 2009. If you see the range of rainfall, it goes from 0 to 300, 400, which is dry. But in this range of dryness, this year has been in the middle, kind of an average.
Yeah, it's fantastic, this chart. You will have it in the presentation. But as you can see, we talk more and more about vintages variation in Argentina. So I think this chart put it in numbers is a very good indication about warmer years and more cooler years.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Pablo.
Thank you, Paz.
And next pictures. So for the temperatures in the north, Nacho, and overall.
This graph is about the degree days. And once again, if we compare this graph with the rainfall, I think that I'd like to focus. I mean, I was listening to the colleagues, to these amazing guys there, and what really it's amazing about Argentina is that every time we talk about Argentina, there exists this huge diversity. We were producing wines in more than 4,000 kilometers of different latitude. We are producing wines from the coastal side, probably almost in sea level, up to more than 3,000 meters above sea level. That would be about probably 10,000 feet if you talk about feet. So that is quite amazing about Argentina. If you think about the big differences that we have in rainfall, in sun radiation, if you talk about a huge thermal amplitude, probably Hans is producing beautiful wines out of varieties that wouldn't fit to the north and otherwise. So this is quite beautiful. And if we talk about this graph, we can make a very close comparison about rainfall. If you see the 1920 year that is represented there by the orange color, that you will see that it's a little flat if you compare to what should be a regular or a average year in the north region. So how this translates into wine, I think that if we I mean about the phenols, about the physiological part of the vineyards, we had a late about 10 to 12 days about the bud burst. Then so we have a long ripening and on way of producing things and breathing things, because I personally like to focus about how the plants what they are producing and what they breathing. In very hot weathers, they like to breathe. They like to breathe acids, and we as winemakers want to keep all the acids on the grapes. So this kind of years, about these degree days or about the rainfall in Cafayate, on how was the distribution, because as we saw in other graph, it was considerably higher. It was above average in terms of the amount of rainfall. But then if you see how it was distributed in the months, I mean, when we started, sometimes I talk to colleagues and I explained this vintage. It was like a huge emotional roller coaster, because one day you were here, the other day you were here, and it was kind of crazy because we started with a very wet. We're talking about we're producing wines here in the north in a desert, so we have a very wet spring, and we said, oh God, because we're not used to work with wet conditions, and we start thinking about and concerning about how this can affect our vineyards. But then in the other months, the amount, the total summatory of millimeters of inches of rainfall flats a little bit. So it was beautiful. It was beautiful and smooth. All the middle and the last period. So this shows about how the ripening process was. It was smooth. We kept the acids. We have lower levels of concentration on phenols, but also there is a beautiful. Sometimes it can be beautiful. Sometimes it can be not so beautiful. This year was absolutely beautiful about the relationship between acidity and phenols. So if I would have to choose one word to talk about and to describe this vintage for the northern region, I would say elegance, because we have these beautiful phenols that ripe slowly. Then we have this good acidity that fits perfectly with the phenols. So you have texture in the wines, you have good acidity, you have lower pH levels, you have lowers. We have in average, especially in our winery, we have in average 0.3 less of alcoholic content in whites and 0.5 in reds. We have also, as Pablo was talking about the malic acid, we have biggest concentration on malic acid on the grapes. So it gives you freshness in some way if you want to keep it. But there is a beautiful double side about malic acid. It is that in the reds, where you need the volume and where you need the elegance, that malic acid after malolactic fermentations goes into and transforms into lactic acid. So you have this beautiful texture with the tannins, with a good acidity, and then this, if you have higher levels on malic, you will have, of course, higher levels on lactic acid. So you have smoother wines and more delicate wines. So once again, if I would need to choose a word for this vintage in the northern region, I would choose elegance.
And Torrontés was fresher as well?
Yes, absolutely. Torrontés was fresher, and Torrontés, there is we talk about Torrontés, and I'm going to be talking about Torrontés and Cabernet, because there is a beautiful thing about sun exposure. Sun exposure here in the north. I mean, in all the high altitude vineyards, high exposure, it's an issue that you have to deal with, because it can give you beautiful things and it can give you pretty complicated things. You have to know how to handle that. So sun exposure in terms of aromatics with Torrontés. If you produce Torrontés in more cloudy environment like it was this year, because we had more cloudy days and not such a huge sun hitting the grapes, the Torrontés expresses more into a more, I would say, citric profile and white flower profile. So it's very delicate. And if we talk about Cabernet Sauvignon and the main aromas, and not also aromas, not only aromas, because if we talk about pyrazines in Cabernet Sauvignon, There is a study from 2014 saying that these pyracins, which is the aroma of Cabernet Sauvignon, mainly had a huge impact also in the tannin structure on wines. So these kind of aromas are very easy to erase with sun. So as we have a cloudy ripening process, we have very beautiful showing Cabernet Sauvignon in structure and in aromas, and of course the Torrontés more into a citric and a white flower profile.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And Hans.
Yeah, I'm dying to try Nacho's wines. They sound really good.
No, just to talk overall, why you will remember always this 2020 vintage and the main aspects?
Sure, the weirdest vintage ever, that's for sure. Look, the 2019, for example, talking about weather patterns, and we all know that weather is changing considerably and quite fast. The 2019 for us was quite weird because it had a Verazon, or Envero in Spanish, actually lasted even a little bit more than a month, which is very, very, very long. And this year it was about 10 days, right? So there's a huge difference between the Verazon of last year and this year, and I think that's what probably marked the difference in the vintage, which differs the both. Last year was a fantastic year. 2019, I think, was one of the great years where everything sort of came into place. This year, it was in two phases really. The first phase, like all my colleagues said, basically February there was a pretty strong heat wave, quite extreme, that accelerated what we thought was going to be a later harvest, because in fact the spring arrived quite late this year for us in Patagonia. There was snow in the Andes until December for sure, actually until January I think. And so we thought, the vintage will be 3 weeks later, and in fact the heat wave in February just accelerated for 3 weeks. And then, of course, March, we had another heat wave. So first heat wave basically changed the whole panorama, and we picked 3 weeks earlier than ever. This is the first time we pick in end of February, actually around the 20th of February. Normally we start picking, we start getting into the groove of the vintage around the 20th of March, right? So there's a huge difference. And so what we picked in the beginning, the first half of the vintage was great, because great pHs, good acidity, good sugars, good everything. And then the second half, the pHs started to rise a bit, because of the extreme heat, and I mean really extreme. We're talking about 40 degrees at least, and strong winds. So that that dehydrates and that accelerates the whole process. So the polyphenols didn't actually get to ripen 100%, but the sugars started going up considerably. So you really had to run for it, right? So we basically at Bodega Noemia anyway, we finished vintage when we normally started. That's how weird the year is. And then of course I would also say we were very lucky, because as it began 3 weeks earlier, we managed to finish without being too bothered by the COVID-19.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Hans. And so it's amazing what the harvest you need to do in maybe 4 months. You needed to do in 2 months and run for that. Maybe we finished with the presentation, Paula, and just a last question to all of you. Marcelo, how was to finish this harvest with with the COVID, what did the winery had to do?
Okay, yes, was a very challenging harvest. From the logistics side, as was very well explained, was early. There was an overlap of ripening between Malbec and Cabernet. This production the warmer year, and the lockdown in Argentina was declared around the 10th of March. But for industry, were declared as essential industry. So we keep working. We're lucky to finish the harvest. Was earlier. It was a kind of bless for the industry. It was a specific year to finish early, and of course that all the industry took all the measures to protect the workers and the people, their families, and the community. So I think that in the Southern Hemisphere, we could learn about the best practices from different countries in the Northern Hemisphere. So this side was more easy in our Southern Hemisphere to take the best practices, like daily meeting, 5-minute meetings every day with the workers, weekly meeting with the workers to explain the safety measure, and to receive ideas from the workers, and of course all the prevention, sanitation, and worker transport. But I want to point out the strong commitment of the whole industry to protect the people. So we were blessed with a short vintage, with a quality vintage as well, because it was a kind of a paradox how a warmer vintage can produce such a high quality wine this year. And it was a kind of apparent paradox, but there were lower yields. That means that the balance of the wine was perfect, was in the optimum range. However, it was a warmer year. If you compare the medium temperature, it's a combination of maximum and minimum. So you have to look not just the average temperature. You have to watch the maximum temperature, and the maximum temperature was slightly higher to average. The increase was mainly in the heat, and you know that the most detrimental factor regarding temperature is the highest. So the highest temperature was like 3-4% higher than historical values, and the minimal temperature was one that is the most extreme. So it was a very good business from the quality side, and very challenging because of the COVID.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. And Pablo, 2 words to finish and to describe this 2020 vintage.
Okay, well, Marcelo explained very well what we have to do in general, and
yes,
the commitment of all the viticulture and wine industry, really, a great commitment. We took all those measures. We had to be very close to people. We had to train them. We had to be beside, trying to be technician, but also ecologist, trying to keep the people working safe. And it was a good thing, fortunately, that this vintage has been a very early and condensed vintage. It was short condensed, and the paradox that Marcelo mentioned, the quality is true. We obtain great quality in red, white, Cabernet Sauvignon with balanced pyrazine character, full of fruit, Malbec, incredibly well concentrated color and difference between the areas. So we will remember this vintage because of these particularities of early, condensed, and high quality.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Pablo. So, Paula, if you want to show that one of the last, yes, I invite you, all of you, to being in the conversation with me next Wednesday. We will explore Jujuy in the north of Argentina. And I thank very much to Pablo, to Hans, Marcelo, Nacho, Gisela, to give us this space to communicate what happened this year in Argentina, and is one of the first Harvard report. So it's fantastic work that you will receive with all the details. And thank you very much, Wines of Argentina, and see you next Wednesday.
Thank you, Paz, and thank you to Pablo, Marcelo, Hans, and Nacho. Thank you very much to all of you also taking part, guys, from all around the world. And we hope to see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.